Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a horrendously busy period in the semester. We're here to talk to the incredible Anna Sui and to Andrew Bolton, who's just written this book on Anna. We're going to be here for about an hour. We're going to talk for about half an hour or so, but what I'm really interested in is questions from you all. So I know that Parsons students are blisteringly inquisitive, and as you've probably all heard me say before, clever people ask clever questions. So while you're listening and lapping up every word, I want to make sure that you're also planning some questions. We'll come to those in a little while. So welcome. Let's start by giving them a round of applause for joining us today. So while this book is all about you, Anna, I want to ask Andrew, what was your favourite thing about working so closely with Anna and writing this book on her?
I think it was just having access to Anna's archives and just her design process. I think as a curator, what you love the most about working with a designer is how a collection comes together, the inspiration, the influences. And Anna's a great storyteller, so every collection has a wonderful narrative to it, and I think she's quite rare in that respect as an American designer. I think a lot of European designers have that narrative approach to fashion, but a lot of American designers, I think, are very non-narrative. You think about Calvin or Donna, it's very non-narrative, and I think that what was so great about Anna is that every single collection told a different story. So that was wonderful to have access to that.
Anna, people often talk about the benefits to a person when they get interviewed, because it compels you to come up with answers to questions you might not ask. I think having 300 pages written about you must be a whole other experience. Did you learn anything about yourself?
Oh, I totally learned. Because if you think about it, when you design, it's all in your mind, and it comes out through your work. But you don't really have to verbalize it. You don't really have to explain it. It's a process that goes through your head. But Andrew put such amazing words to explain it and to put it all together that it kind of taught me something about my own thinking process, because I never analyzed it, it just happened. And Andrew spelled it out so clearly and made sense of it all, so I'm not as crazy as I thought.
We'll be the judge of that. So, you, again, you're often quoted as saying that you knew you wanted to be a designer from the age of 4. Mm-hmm. When did you realize you had to come here to learn to be a designer?
I somehow must have seen something on television where there was a fashion designer that had like beautiful fabric and was draping it around a mannequin, and I thought, oh, that looks good. And then they always had like glamorous clothes on and probably went out to lunch. And I saw an article in Life magazine, which was something that every household got weekly. And in there was an article about 2 young ladies that graduated from Parsons School of Design and immediately after went to Paris. Elizabeth Taylor, who was the big movie queen of the day, opened a boutique for them, and the rest is history. Well, being a very visual person, I only ever read the captions. I never really read the article. And years later, when I came across the article, because I saved it, it said, Mia Fonsegraves, whose mother was the legendary model Lisa Fonsegraves, and whose stepfather was Irving Penn. Makes a difference. There's connections there. And again, as a kid, you don't understand that. All I thought was Parsons. And I remember seeing an article in the back of, it was actually an ad in the back of 17 magazine, which my babysitter had, that said, apply to Parsons. So I wrote to Parsons and I got the registration information and the requirements of what you needed to have in order to apply to Parsons. And I worked towards that goal.
Good for us. So how did the experience bear up to what you were expecting? I mean, people talk, here you are, known around the world, immensely successful and respected, but it's been very, very tough to get here, like for many people. And there was a point from leaving college to when you actually launched your business and then had a runway show. And all these students are going to go through that very, very soon. How did that bear up to your expectation? And what kind of things did you learn?
Well, I have to say, quite honestly, I went straight from high school to Parsons. Okay, think about New York City in the 70s when everything was happening, clubs, bands, artists. I mean, it was a whole different city back in the 70s. And it was a very small community of very, very creative people. So I had a lot of distractions when I was at Parsons. I could tell you every club, every hot spot, but I don't know about the homework.
Don't listen to that.
But I had this determination as far as becoming a designer. And in my junior year, I overheard 2 seniors talking about a job opportunity. And I put together my portfolio and I went up to that job opportunity and I got it. And that's why I didn't I didn't go my 3rd year of school at that point because I had a job already and it was the job that I wanted. There was a designer called Erica Elias who did a very, very well-known junior sportswear company. This is before contemporary, before like Barney's Co-op. There was only junior and designer as far as like ladies fashion. And I got the job and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had the toughest boss on earth. If you're talking, you're not working, so meant no talking. If she wanted gingham, you had to show her every possible choice of gingham. And if you forgot one, she would throw it all back at you and say, do this more completely. And it was just, she had such a tough reputation in the market. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me because I really had to buckle down and really, really learn my resources.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the class that we want to launch here, which is getting a thick skin.
Yes.
Because you have to have that.
Definitely.
So I'm interested in the kind of relationships you established when you were at school, because I mean, many of us know, but I think you embody. You're only really going to be successful if you've built the right kind of relationships. Obviously, Andrew and you have known each other for a long time, and hence the book is absolutely lovely. But I know you famously met with Stephen Meisel when you were here, and that was very influential for your career.
Yeah, Stephen and I met in the lunchroom because design students weren't really allowed to mingle with the other students, and he was in illustration. But I would sneak down to the lunchroom because everything was happening down there. Everyone was talking about parties and music and things that were going on. So I would sneak down, and I met Stephen. And we started kind of hanging out together. My apartment was like Clubhouse Central. Everyone would come over. We would go out to clubs and bands and things, meet people and bring them back to my apartment, dress them up and take pictures. So hence Stephen got interested in photography after his illustration, and I was the one who styled and dressed everyone that came to my apartment.
And he was instrumental, wasn't he, in terms of your runway, your first runway presentation?
Yeah. I worked for a few years in the industry, and I had this crazy idea to do my own collection. I had some friends that sold to all the rock and roll boutiques, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. Like, that's what I want to do. So I put together a small collection, did a boutique show, and got all these orders, which included department store orders. Consequently, I got windows and New York Times ads. And the job that I was working at, the man who owned it saw the New York Times ad, called me into the office, and fired me because I was not producing under his label, and it was my own label. And that's how I started my business. But years went by, and I slowly was building my business, reinvesting every penny into it, doing tons of freelance. And I went to the fashion shows for the first time in 1990 with Stephen Meisel. And on the way to our first show, which was the Jean Paul Gaultier show, we stopped and picked up Madonna. And I walked into her hotel room at the Ritz, and there were like shopping bags from every major designer, just like heaps of clothes and shopping bags and racks. And I thought, oh my God, she is the luckiest girl on earth. Look at all the Chanel, look at all the Versace, look at all these clothes. And we got to the fashion show, and when she took off her coat, she said, Anna, I have a surprise for you. And she was wearing my dress. So that was kind of one of the things that really gave me confidence, because during that trip, Stephen kept saying, well, next year it's going to be your show. And that was kind of a terrifying prospect, but there were certain things that gave me the confidence to do it.
I think there's some very instructive points in there that we do talk about. And one is look for collaborations within the school. I mean, as Anna said, she was hanging around with the graphic designers. And I don't know if any of us in here know our friends in graphic design downtown, but the next Stephen Meisel could be there. And the other is looking for friends of friends outside. New York City is an essential part of our school, and everyone needs to be taking advantage of that. Andrew, you're from a land far, far away. When did you first come across Anna's work?
And I seen it in magazines when I was in London, but we first met actually at a CFDA Awards with Vivian Tam, and Anna was one of my great sort of heroes in terms of the fashion industry because she had such a sort of singular voice. So I was really excited to meet her, and we became really, really good friends. And one of my favourite journeys we ever had was Anna was doing a collection on one of Anna's typically madcap collections, which combined gypsies, Marie Antoinette, Minnie Mouse, and it was all there. And we went off to a place in the north of England looking for the King of the Gypsies, which Anna found on the internet. And we forged a relationship really throughout that period.
So when you talk about your time at Parsons, Anna, and you mentioned interning, that's something that, of course, is on the minds of everyone here. I know you're kind enough to employ many of ours as internships. How important was that to you?
I guess back then we called it more freelance or part-time. Like interning really wasn't a thing that happened. We did get paid. And my first part-time job was sketching at Jeffrey Bean. And it was just in the showroom. I don't think I ever really met Jeffrey Bean, but I got to see his clothes. I got to draw them. I got to look at like all the detail of it. And I have to say that to me that was like such a meaningful accomplishment because it was such a glamorous atmosphere to be in. It was here on 7th Avenue. And to be able to study those clothes up close and really, really kind of sketch it, it's almost like, you know, putting it into your memory in every detail. And many, many years later, I got to meet Mr. Bean, and I was able to thank him for that opportunity. But I think that what I'm trying to say is every little bit helps. Everything that you can do to learn your craft, learn detailing, learn the signatures of other designers, I think will only help you develop your own.
Did Mr. Bean have an impact in terms of his fashions?
Completely. I was crazy about his clothes. And I think that in my genius files of all the tear sheets and pictures that I saved, there's a huge portion of it is Jeffrey Bean. I think that later in his career, he was much more serious about his fashion. But when he was designing in the 60s and 70s, there was a very whimsical side to him. And very, very cute, which I wouldn't use that to describe his clothes in the later.
Well, he did like baby doll dresses.
He did, and he did them better than anyone.
Yeah, he was amazing. And it was fascinating working on the book, actually, was looking at the American influences in Anna's work. You see Schiaparelli often, you see Chanel from the 30s, but I wasn't that much aware of the sort of 7th Avenue designers, and they had a huge impact on me, like Claire McCardle, Bonnie Cashin.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, and my first job was working in the dry cleaners. So again, the first designer clothes I ever saw, I had one customer that wore a lot of Chanel, Tifo, Courrèges, and I would see these clothes up close. And I mean, I can't tell you how much I learned from just looking at how the clothes were made and the proportion, the detail, fabrication. So I grew to love fashion in all those ways. And every weekend I would go to the major department stores to look at the designer departments. And that helped me understand merchandising, helped me understand fabrication, make, what the seasons were, the colors were. And I think, again, that's all key to understanding how to design.
So, obviously there's a very discernible Anna Sui look, which we can all recognize, and yet you take many different kinds of inspiration, and clearly your work, as anyone would see in this book, has evolved greatly over the last years. Where do you look for inspiration? I mean, are there times when you find you don't have enough, or are there times when you think, I've got 11 different kinds of inspiration, which one can I use?
I can use everything in my work, but you have to also learn how to focus and learn how to make it relatable, because fashion is a reflection of what's going on. You can't decide that this year it's the clown look and everyone's going to dress like clowns and you're going to wear clown wigs, and it just doesn't work that way. It has to be something that's in the air. So I have inspiration boards, and actually there's 4 of them in my office, and each one represents a delivery so that everyone in my office can understand what's first, second, third, and fourth as far as fabrication, how I see the colors moving through the deliveries. But also it gives me a chance to focus. And the first things that go up are pictures that are inspiring me. And if I can think of a story. And that's the hardest thing. It's like, what is your theme or your story or your inspiration going to be for the season? And you kind of just pray that lightning will strike and you'll hit upon it. But the other thing you have to understand is it's a process. And if you don't get it today, it could come tomorrow. But it's all working towards that. And that's the key thing, is to just keep working and moving forward. And by placing colors, by placing images, somehow you'll start making sense out of it and organizing it like the way I do on my boards.
And had you always used a storyboard?
It was when I got my own office, because I started my business getting fired, and so we had to use I had like kind of a big loft-like apartment. So it started out in a corner of that loft and kind of filled the loft in the 10 years that I was working towards doing a fashion show. So I had moved the year before my first fashion show to a small space up in the garment center. And Stephen Meisel said to me, now you need a wall. And I didn't know what he meant. He said, every designer has a wall. So he introduced me to his carpenter, and he put up a wall, and we put kind of like, it's not corkboard, it's like homosate, like board that you can put push pins in. And that became my wall. And that's, I mean, it made so much sense because you could constantly stare at it and it would start making sense to you what you were trying to do. Where working on different little pieces of paper, you didn't have the overall view of it. And everyone else in the office didn't either. So it kind of spread the word as far as what you're thinking.
Andrew, do you have a collection of Annas that really struck you? Or was there a moment when you thought, wow, this is someone I really have to have a look at?
I think one of my favorite collections was the 18th century gypsy collection. And I think what's so great about Anna is that she draws all these different references from everywhere, from art, from music, from film, from her own life. I mean, Anna's work's very autobiographical, reads like a diary sometimes. So she has all these influences from all over the place. And it always comes together in a very sort of Anna Sui sort of look, and the prints, the color. But it really is this eclectic sort of postmodern mixing of influences that I think is the most compelling aspect of Anna's work. And also that it's very wearable. I mean, John Galliano has a very similar approach to fashion, but Anna's very pragmatic. I think that that was something which is also interesting working with Anna, was the fact that, you know, at the bottom line, it has to be wearable, it has to be clothing. So there's a pragmatism which I think comes from the American sportswear tradition that's very much part of Anna's sensibility, I think.
I think you've actually hit upon something that comes up from time to time when we compare this school and the way that we work in this city with other, you know, some might say more conceptual schools in Europe, which do wonderful things. But I think the pragmatism that we have here, that is contained within the curriculum in Parsons and other schools, is really vital, and I think is part of the reason why our designers are so successful.
Totally.
So, Anna, as far as the creative process goes, of course, when you started, then I suppose you could seek inspiration in whatever magazines you happen to have, or you could go to the library. And now, every single person in this room, including us three, has the entire world in their pocket on their phone. Mm-hmm. So any image you want ever of anything, you can get, which is a whole different way of looking. You know, it might have been that Vogue, the 3 or 4 Vogues that were available in the 70s, you know, were very influential. But now it's 3,000 or 4,000 magazines. How has your creative process evolved, or has it indeed?
Well, one of the things with having that accessibility, it almost takes away from it being so special. And I think that that's kind of the difference, is that when you have that much accessibility, it doesn't burn into your brain the way when you could just see one like little postage stamp size picture of something. So I kind of a lot of times refer to some of those old pictures that I remember seeing, but what I'll do is I'll research more about it. Because again, as I explained, I didn't read a lot, I only looked at the pictures. So now I go back and I kind of read the whole story and really get what inspired what, why Marissa Berenson was wearing a Schiaparelli outfit. Well, her grandmother was Schiaparelli, and she had passed away and she inherited the outfit. But all I thought was, oh, look, she's dressing 40s. You know, like, so I think that, like, that's kind of the difference nowadays. But of course, you can find so much more now. And I think one thing always takes you to another, which is when, you know, you really take advantage of the internet and really explore as much as you can, because that's part of the creative process, is having one idea but then taking it to other levels and branching out. So I think that there's a big advantage now to have that accessibility, but then the disadvantage is that it's not quite as special.
Yeah, I think one of the things that all designers do is editing. You know, there's 1,000 influences out there, but you've got to choose the one that's absolutely important. I think the other thing is, and you mentioned it earlier, none of the availability of influence changes the fact that you've got to deliver wearable product. Because it's very easy to get caught up in I'm so conceptual and I've come up with this wonderful inspiration and blah, blah, blah. And then the thing at the end of it, it's not a nice dress that you can wear. And if it's not a nice dress you can wear, then it probably didn't work.
And it has to be part of what's going on in the season. You can't be dancing to your own music. You know, it has to be part of fashion.
And it's really interesting you should say that, because I think many people would look at what you do and say that you've always stood alone. You know, there's a very discernible, and always has been, Anna Sui look, and yet here you are saying that you have to be part of the fashion system.
Well, I think that I keep my eye in both places. I love going to the stores and seeing what's in there. That was part of my favorite thing when I was in school, is the fact that they taught us to shop the market, to see what's in the windows, to see what's in the stores, and really to understand the merchandising of the stores. And that's something that I find myself doing, like on weekends or after work, just to see what's going on. And keeping that in mind, then I do things my way. But of course you have to think, like, where is this going to hang? Where, you know, what department are you going to fit into? Is the buyer going to be able to afford this? There's all those things that you have to really give yourself kind of that discipline to be able to fit into a store, unless you want to have your own couture boutique and then you don't care.
But also music's a huge influence, and I think that's also kept your finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening, because music's such a big sort of area of sort of youthful sort of exuberance, and I think that's part of very much your work, right from the beginning.
Well, I think, again, like my theory is that fashion is a reflection of what's going on. I'm not an artist where I can just create something. It's got to be part of a whole, and I think that that's something that you have to keep in mind.
So Andrew, you have probably had a greater exposure to Anna's work than anybody else. What surprised you? What did you learn that you weren't expecting? And Anna, you may not have to listen to this bit.
I think part of it was the Americanness of Anna's work. That was surprising to me. Because the influences I always found fascinating, and I love designers who approach design like that, where they look for inspiration from all these different sources and put them together in new ways. And she's very much like a bricoleur sort of person who puts all these sort of like different composites together and something new comes out of it. But it really was the fact that not just American designers, but American culture has really influenced Anna. I mean, I was surprised that Anna was a preppy growing up. That was a huge surprise. And preppiness has really influenced a lot of Anna's collections. How much she loved the west coast of America, you know, the hippies and High-Ashbury. I mean, that sort of side I wasn't that familiar with. So I think that was one of the biggest surprises, was really how deeply American Anna's. Because I can read her Anglophilia really well, and I can read, you know, her love of the English eccentrics. But I wasn't reading the Americanness of it, and that was, to me, a big surprise in her work.
So, getting to a slightly more conceptual perspective, you've been around for a little while now. What do you feel is the role of fashion in American culture? I mean, I know it's a sweeping question, but you know, I think that we, given the internet and given the amount of information that we all have access to and the discussions that can now take place, it doesn't just get put in front of us. You know, we can find out an awful lot more about it, as you did about the Schiaparelli. What do you feel? What are your thoughts about the role of fashion in today's society?
Well, I think that, you know, it used to be, what was great about fashion was that every culture had its own look. And there was a distinct style when you went to London or Paris, Tokyo. And in the last 20, 30 years, globalization has changed that. Every city you go to, you kind of have to remember where you are, because everyone dresses the same. We all have the same influences with CNN, the internet, MTV. And we also have the same availability, because you can buy it on the internet, or you have a Prada in your town. You know, it's like it's all changed. And I think the other big change in fashion has been the casualness. Like casual has taken over. And I remember thinking about that in an airport, like sitting in an airport because of a delayed flight and thinking, 10 years ago, people would have been in suits, in dresses, in their nice clothes. Nowadays, everyone's in leisure wear and carrying like a down coat because they can pack it to a very small thing in their suitcase. And everyone's on roller wheels. I mean, this is all changed. So I think that's the thing to think about as far as what the future is going to be. It's all going to be about convenience, immediacy, and I think comfort. Comfort is like a big thing now.
But I think, but by comfort, we don't necessarily mean wearing sweats. You know, I think that
No,
you can
but
be
if you think about airports, you see a lot of sweats.
Yeah, perish them. But you can be comfortable and elegant. You know,
Yes.
it strikes me that where designers might have expected women to suffer to wear their dresses, now that's not necessarily an option. Now they want to look gorgeous and then glamorous and everything else, but they don't really want to be that uncomfortable. I mean, Andrew, you'll know much about this from the history of costume.
Yeah, and I still think the role of fashion is still to inspire. I still really believe that fashion is an art form, a living art form, and what I've always loved about it is that its immediacy and its democracy. Everybody has an opinion about it. It can change you dramatically. You know, it can hide your flaws. It can make you more beautiful. It can make you more ugly. But I think that the idea of fashion and identity is something that's really critical, and the sort of fantasy around fashion, I really is something I would love to encourage. So I find that fascinating. I think that, you know, fashion should be something it's inspirational. And as Anna said, I think it does very much reflect the zeitgeist and what's going on. At the same time, I really feel that it's something that should inspire people and should inspire beauty.
Talking of the zeitgeist and what's going on, something that obsesses us here in Parsons is sustainability. And where, you know, that of course is a journey, and, you know, it's a very broad church, and it can include ecologically sound product, but it can also include sustaining a factory of, you know, luxury trunk makers. What do you think, Anna, what do you think a designer's responsibility is these days to the people that are coming after them?
I think that maybe you've all heard that I'm very involved in Save the Garment Center. And I think that I really believe that if I didn't have this accessibility to this area, to the trims, buttons, zippers, scissor sharpeners, fabrics, pattern makers, everything that goes into making clothes, I don't know that I could have made my own business. I think I would have had to have worked for somebody. And it's something that I'm trying to encourage more people to get involved with, because we have that luxury here in New York. I think no other city really has it. But it's something that's disappearing, something that is up against a lot of landlords, a lot of the business people. And I think that if students could get involved with believing in this cause, I think that it'll make your life easier. Like, you're going to be able to find the materials that you need, the supplies that you need, all within these few blocks. And I don't know that any other city really has that.
Not at all.
I think it's a huge advantage that we in this school have over every other design school as well. You know, the fact that you're literally outside of the district and everything you want is right there, including all the people to inspire you. You can walk down the road and you may well run into Anna or any one of the other designers that work in the neighborhood. So thinking of the future, technology, of course, is pervading everything now. How has it affected the way that you work?
It's, again, because I'm really like kind of right in between loving the old way and the new way. Like for prints, you know, everyone knows I do a lot of prints. When we started doing prints, every print studio had artists that painted the prints. To me, they were more beautiful than CADs. But that's to my eye. Of course, now you don't have to wait three days to a week to get a CAD. And you can try a multitude of colorations. I mean, everything is just much more accessible. Printing, a lot of people are going towards digital printing. So you don't have to worry about the old problems of the size of the screen, the repeat, how many colors you can do. Again, that's a fantastic thing. But sometimes having that restriction and that limitation, you can get very creative. But I guess people are going to find the opposite. With no limitation, maybe you can get even more creative. I don't know. I think that it works both ways.
That's a fascinating point, and it sort of relates back to what we were saying about having all the world in your pocket. You know, a computer's a tool. It's not the end result. You know, the end result has to be your creativity, and if you use the tool to create something, great. But if you rely on the tool to be the creative element, then that's not what it's all about. And what about social media and, you know, different ways of showing your collection, different ways of interacting with your customers? I mean, your store, of course, is very inspiring, and it's a wonderful experience, particularly the one downtown, to go into it. But how have you given much thought or taken any steps in the direction of interacting with your fans around the world in other ways?
Well, Anna Sui is on Facebook. We have a internet store now. But I'd say we still get more people coming to my store in Soho than we do buying online. I think that, again, like there were limitations as far as what I was working with before, and now there are no limitations, but how you best use those unlimited resources is a whole other thing that I think people are just starting to figure out now.
Right.
So maybe you have some suggestions.
What about the fashion presentation, like runway presentation? Do you think there would be a time that that'll become redundant?
I think people always talk about it, but it's just like designing clothes with tech packs. I'm, again, old school. I like to see how the fabric drapes. I like to see how the sleeve is going to hang on the jacket. I like to see how the lining is going to react with the fabric on the top, with the interfacing. That's, to me, the beauty of the craft. With a tech pack, you kind of disregard all those things and just hope it all comes out well. I don't know. I'm, again, in between the old and the new.
Yeah, and then there's plenty of software programmers that would have you sketch on the computer and it goes straight to the factory and the sample comes back, so you don't even bother to do the tech pack. So two of the biggest stories during the last Fashion Week in terms of presentation were Burberry and Tom Ford, who went to both extremes. Which way do you think Anna Sui's going to go? Heading in one direction or the other? You know, very, very private or completely public, buy it now off the runway?
Well, which seemed more special to you?
Well, it's one of them sounds more special, but I never saw it, so and that's kind of the fun.
Again, that's the big dilemma, because the immediacy of being able to buy something online and then they'll produce it for you within a short time, it doesn't allow for the whole cycle that's required to produce a collection. Those people had to invest, buy the fabric, develop everything way ahead of time. Where with the way the companies are set up now, you show a collection, you show it to the buyers, they place orders, and then you have a cycle of production where you can decide to buy the fabric, work on the patterns, cut it, sew it, ship it. I don't know that a lot of companies are going to be able to project the whole buy each time. So there is a cycle that's involved, and there's suppliers and workmanship that needs to be done between that. So it's something that, again, if you're making a repeated garment that's easy to make, or if you have the luxury of a company like Burberry, yes, it's possible.
I think it calls into question the whole way that this thing has evolved. You know, Chris Sanderson spoke yesterday at a conference and said that we're actually in the worst possible situation. We show things that you can't deliver for 6 months. By the time you deliver them, we're out of season. You know, we deliver spring in the middle of the winter. You know, everything about the way we do this is wrong, but we're all stuck with it. So
I wonder, do you think it's a way of speeding that up, Anna? A way of like short-circuiting that?
Or just controlling it.
Yeah.
Again,
I mean,
it's because with globalization, you don't have as many suppliers. So consequently, that fabric that you like doesn't really exist until you place the order and they make it and ship it. It used to be that fabric houses would project and develop fabrics, and then you could get it more quickly, you get more of it. But now everything is custom made. It's no one has that luxury anymore. That's the difficult thing. Even a denim, that I just went through this with my staff, there's a denim that we've used year after year after year. It's not available anymore. So what do we have to do? We have to go out and find new denims to try, experiment with, and decide which one makes up well. Where before we had the luxury of just calling in that one denim. So I don't know. It's like part of the problem now is that no one has that luxury of having stock.
So maybe it's moving towards the Tom Ford model then, where you control the exposure of it. You know, you can still show to the relevant people, you can buy the fabric, you can produce the goods, you just don't expose it to everybody in advance.
Well, that's the whole thing that, to me, has kind of been difficult with fashion. Like, it used to be that you would see pictures from a fashion show or the video from the fashion show, and you'd get all excited about next season's clothes. But then suddenly there were people already wearing it. The models would come into your showroom the next day or the fitting the next day wearing the shoes that you saw on the runway. So all of a sudden you're not going to be the first one to have it. And then if lines are producing it like the way Burberry was, where you're going to have it in a couple weeks, then again, it's not within season. So you have to just really retrain yourself as far as what's special and what the seasons are.
So questions from the audience. Who has a question? Yep, I see in the front row. There's a microphone, actually. Can I...
Thank you. So as a young designer, it's often very overwhelming to visualize the process of getting from where we are to where you are as a success. And so my question is, what were some of the difficulties that you struggled with as a young designer starting out, and how did you overcome them?
I think that I was incredibly lucky because I had a focus. I always knew that I wanted to do young, spirited clothing at a certain price point. And as I mentioned, originally that category was called junior, but I think my design was a little more sophisticated than what junior clothes are. And I was in the right place at the right time because there was a market that was evolving, which was called contemporary. So there were stores that supported it, like a Barney's Co-op, like a lot of the department stores opened up a new section. Because, I mean, think about it. I would have had to hang next to Bill Blass. That kind of doesn't make sense. But slowly, fashion was evolving, and there were other people that fit into that same category that I was designing in. So these are the things you have to think about, because, again, you're not just an artist. You have to fit into a commercial world. So what market are you trying to aim for? What's your forte? What are you strongest in, and what is it that you believe in most? Some people are great at swimwear or evening. Some people are great at tailoring. So the market is vast, and there's so many places that you can concentrate on, but that's the whole key, is learning that craft, learning the resources of that craft. And really developing your personal style with icons, like I used black and purple and butterflies and roses and the whole rock and roll kind of image. Like, all those things worked to my advantage, because when I was approached by stores later in my career, or contracts like perfume, cosmetics, all those things, there was an identity that they could draw on. And those are all the things that you as a designer need to think about for yourself. And it happens differently for everyone. So you can't pattern yourself after a one person thing. I think that's why it's so important to really go out there and explore.
So I think there's two very clear messages in that. Do your homework and look for your...
And go shopping.
Yeah, go shopping. Do your homework and look for your inner vision. Because I think what Anna isn't saying about herself, because she's too modest, is that she had this pure vision right from the beginning, and you can see that in her earliest work, and you can see that in her current work. And that happens to be her natural, innate talent. you're all here and you're all very, very talented. You have to find your own vision and then do your homework, and by which I mean not the 40 croquis that are all due tomorrow, although you do have to do that. But it's, we live in a real world and we sell real clothes, so go to real stores and find out where they're going to hang, because your concept simply might not have a home. Another question? Yes, over here.
Hi, Anna. My name's Joseph. I have a question. When you start developing your collection, how do you merchandise it? Do you just start sketching out and then decide later on you want this, you want that, or do you just put everything on the runway?
No. Okay, that's a great question. First, you have to come up with some sort of an idea. Like it could be as vague as I want it to be Victorian. And then you start thinking about all the components that you need. And you start looking at fabric collections, you start looking at colors. And again, as I do, you put it up on the board, and you just really have to think about what is it that you're trying to say. And it helps with like pictures for inspiration because it helps you focus. Like my collection that I just finished, it was inspired by that movie Days of Heaven. And I started out by buying one of the old movie posters and looking at it, and I loved the color of it, which consequently became the backdrop of the show. There was a kind of a faded, kind of sepia tone quality, which became kind of the patina that I used on all the fabrics. So you need a focus. I don't think so much about the actual garments till my pattern makers are available, which isn't always right away. And so usually I start out with the more complicated pieces, like the jackets, the dresses, the things that will kind of give me the shapes that I'm going for the season. And again, as I keep saying over and over, it's a process. One piece leads to another. You can't possibly think of the whole collection at once, but maybe you'll make a jacket and you'll love the way the fabric looks, the way the sleeve hangs, and oh, maybe I should try that sleeve on a blouse too. Make it a little smaller, make it a little more simplified, but that same sleeve. Or, oh, you could take this sleeve and turn it into this. So each thing, one thing leads to another, but you have to allow yourself that time and to go through the exercise of the process.
Another question? Yes, over here.
Hi, Anna. I was just wondering, do you have any regrets or anything, rather, that you wish you had known sooner? And do you wish you had finished school at Parsons?
That I wish I would have known sooner.
Any regrets?
Any regrets?
I've had a few.
I think maybe in looking back, and this book gave me a really big opportunity to look back, because you almost don't have time to look back because of the challenge of moving forward every season, that I would have appreciated the moments and really spent time, instead of dwelling on the insecurity of the moment, enjoying the moment. I think that that's something important, and that's a big lesson in life that you have to learn. But as being a creator, you kind of never dwell on that part. You always think about like what you could have done better and what you have to do next season. And when you read a review, usually the only thing you remember is like if there's something negative.
Don't ever you read your reviews. Yeah. That's a very good point, because one of the things we encounter here in the school is there was a lot of challenges. There's a lot of work, but it's a tough city to live in and everything else. But I think unless people really seize the opportunities that are here today, right now, then they're missing out. And I love your answer. I think it's very poignant, because it is so easy to think, oh God, I didn't do this and I didn't do that.
Or so-and-so did it so much better.
Yeah.
Which you can focus on too. I mean, that's your nature, like being a creative person.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? You got any regrets? Is there anything, so the book is finished, it's available. Is there anything you wish you'd asked Anna?
I wish there was more storyboards. I wish that's one regret for the book, is that when we began working on the book together, I was very keen that it looked very clean and just focused on editorials and catwalks, and Anna suggested more storyboards, and it's really enriched the book. So I wish there was more of those, actually, to show how the collection came together and the inspiration behind it, because they're really telling when you look at them.
That can be part two.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could do a website and list of things you could have put up there. Is there another question? Yes, over here.
Hi. you're being sold like globally, all over the world, and there must be like, how you're doing differences in how you're doing in different markets, like continent-wise, right? And what market or what continents have you been doing well, and what markets not so, and what do you think that is?
That's interesting. Okay, when I started doing fashion shows, the one thing, again, being in the right place at the right time, New York became kind of a center for international fashion. Every international journalist was here. Every major department store was here. Everyone was looking to New York for the excitement and for newness. I consequently got approached by every distributor, manufacturer, any shape, form of distribution in Japan. They all approached me. And I decided to go with a retailer because to me that makes the most sense. If you don't have someplace to sell your clothes, you're nowhere. So I was approached by Isetan. But interestingly enough, a few weeks before that, there was a Japanese buyer in the showroom saying, Anna Sui is Chinese. Japanese people will never buy a Chinese designer. Well, he regretted those words. But that was the mindset then. So that's the other thing you always have to keep in mind. There are always obstacles that people will put up. You have to overcome those obstacles. You have to keep your focus, which is what I did. The other thing that happened, they didn't want me to create a collection for the Japanese market. They wanted a New York designer and everything manufactured in New York. They wanted the real deal because if you think about it, the Japanese consumer at that point in 1991, 92, they were the most sophisticated shoppers in the world. They traveled to Paris to buy 5 Chanel bags because they couldn't get the same thing in Tokyo. But they knew exactly what model they wanted, what color they wanted, and they knew where to get it. And that's the other thing. That's why I keep saying you need to do your research. You need to kind of understand the merchandising. You need to understand what people want, how people shop.
I think there's another little thing in there as well, which is having looked through the book, many of the most creative images are from Isetan. So it's clear that they were much more interested in experimenting than maybe some of our local friends would be.
Yeah.
And I don't know when you first put the business together if you were thinking I'm going to be big in Japan before I am in America, but I suspect possibly not. So it strikes me that we've all got to look for opportunities wherever they present themselves.
Exactly.
And they might not be the ones we're expecting.
And that was at the moment of globalization too. And when Asia became a big focus in the world. And everyone knew that if you were famous in Japan, your next territory would be China, which put me at a big advantage, being Chinese and also being popular in Japan. So again, it's taking advantage of the situation, really understanding how to kind of move with the times. Because I don't know that anyone could have written this out, but being able to react and perform when you need to is very important.
Is China your biggest market now?
Between China and Japan, yeah, and also Taiwan in between. But I do sell in Europe, I do sell in the United States and Middle East too, but a lot in Asia, especially my cosmetics and fragrance.
So we've time for another couple of quick questions. Who's next? This young lady. Oh, go ahead. Tamara.
Hi, my name is Tamara Albu and I teach here. So my question for you is, what was your favorite course when you were here at Parsons?
It sounds like it was nightclubbing.
Besides the major. The nightclub.
My favorite course.
Well, you keep talking
And a
about
star.
draping being very important, so I've got to
Draping
assume
was
that
important, but I always knew that wasn't going to be my job. But I understood the fundamentals because I started sewing my own clothes. I think I took home ec my first year of junior high school, and I started sewing my own clothes to the point I became such a fanatic about sewing that 1 year in school I decided I was never going to wear the same thing twice, and I kept making clothes. Like every weekend I would make new clothes. So I knew how to sew. I knew how to put patterns together. I could buy like 5 different patterns and mix them all up. Like I knew all that. Again, I'm trying to say is I knew my craft.
Another question? There's someone with the microphone in the middle there, yes.
Yes, okay. Hello. You recently designed a budget collection for Target. Oh, for some customers, like that's the only way to access your designs. I want to ask 2 things. First, how is your relationship with that collection like compared to your ready-to-wear? Is it different? Is it less? Is it more shallow maybe? And also, what do you think those kind of collections are for the future of fashion? Does that?
I think that's really important to kind of understand that. You know, I do so many different products, but I think what's made them all successful is that not every woman has the lifestyle or the budget to buy an Anna Sui dress. But if you buy a tube of Anna Sui lipstick or buy nail polish, you get the same excitement. We put that much into the packaging, into the product itself, into the colors that are available. And so I approach Target the same way. One of the great things about Target is they have the most incredible sourcing team on earth. So we really only had a few meetings when we did that huge collection. And I had been approached by them for a while, but I couldn't make sense of how could Anna Sui design for Target, like what would make sense out of it. And they came to me with a new concept that they had where you had to have some sort of an inspiration. And I had traveled in Japan and China on a really extensive cosmetic and perfume tour. And one of the things that really struck me was that every young woman at lunchtime, all the workers in the PR and the people that worked at the counters, they all asked me, where's Williamsburg? What's uptown? They were asking me all these questions. I'm like, oh, you know, what are you talking about? And they said, Gossip Girl. And do you know that it was not broadcast in Asia at that point? They saw it all on the internet. And I came back and I thought, like, bingo, this is it. This is the phenomena right now. That if so many people are interested in Gossip Girl, which all my nieces were also, that this would make such a natural inspiration. And if you think about it, the characters in the TV series kind of all reflect different aspects of my design. There's the one from Williamsburg that dresses a little funky and a little vintage. There's the very feminine one. And then there's a more sophisticated one. So I used each character for a different storyboard. So again, this is what I keep saying. It's got to make sense. It's got to fall into place. And you have to make sense out of it. You can't just come up with something out of the blue. It all has to fall into place.
All right, one last question. Who's got the microphone? Put your hand up.
Hi, my name is Holly. I just have one question for you. Your aesthetic obviously draws from a lot of inspiration, but I'm curious to know that if you had to pick your absolute favorite, just one to design for the rest of your career, what would that be?
Just one garment?
One inspiration,
Oh,
like
one
one form of
inspiration.
inspiration to draw around.
I think,
Music?
yeah.
Music.
Yeah, like rock music. I think that you see that that's the undercurrent in almost every collection that I do. Very few collections have been without the music behind it. And I think if you look at each collection, you can almost hear what I was listening to.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to ask you one last thing from both of you, just for that last little bit of advice you would give. We've got probably 300 students in here, and they're desperately searching for all the input and advice they can possibly get. So if there's one thing you'd like to leave everybody with, what would that be?
And I think you're better suited for this.
I think it's what I've been trying to say all along. You have to find your own way, and you always have to remember there's always going to be obstacles, but you can't use those obstacles as an excuse. When I started, there wasn't a market for my clothes. I helped create it. When I sold all the stores in the US, where was I going to expand? I looked for a new horizon. I mean, all those things, you have to overcome the obstacles, and you're your own worst enemy being a creative person. So you have to understand that, and you have to look at the other side of things. And I think that that's key, is always looking forward, always looking to the positive.
Andrew, you've had unique exposure to Anna and her life's work so far. What would you leave our students with?
I think some of what Anna was saying is to look to the future always. And I think that, as Anna said, there's so many things that she didn't expect throughout her career that's just opened the doors for her. So I think that was something which was really interesting, is just how Anna's vision was so strong and so sort of emphatic, and she really stuck to it, and she always saw what was happening next. So I think just look to the future, yeah.
Well, thank you both very, very much for a wonderfully inspiring talk.
Thank you.